Have you been trying to figure out why you have no energy and can't think straight, but all the doctors that you go to say,
"You're fine"?
Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you how I got down to the root cause of my chronic fatigue and brain fog and how I finally recovered. So this video is broken down into a few parts. Firstly, I'm going to share with you my experience with chronic fatigue and brain fog. Next, I'm going to go into my recovery and how that unfolded. And lastly, I'm going to share with you some tips and next steps to help you get started on uncovering what might be the root cause of your chronic fatigue and brain fog. Today's topic is near and dear to my heart. It's the whole reason why I got into biohacking, functional medicine, and personal development. I spent about 5 to 6 years, starting in my early 20s, completely depleted of energy, not knowing why I just wasn't functioning the way I should for my age, why I couldn't enjoy life, and why there wasn't any solutions for me. So I first started experiencing chronic fatigue in college. It was hard to get up in the morning, hard to make it to class, my schoolwork was difficult, and I had some mild depression, just felt kind of blah. So, at the time I went to see if I had ADHD, and I was able to get some medication for that. And at first it really helped. My schoolwork was a lot easier to accomplish. I felt focused, felt more engaged, and even socially it helped a lot. I felt much more animated and interesting. But after a while I felt that I became dependent on it, that both for everyday functioning, school, and even socially, I just didn't feel like I could show up without the help of ADD medication. Otherwise, I'd be drained or disengaged. And my inner critic at that time was showing up, and it was, telling me a lot of things like, you aren't good enough as you are. You need to prepare or be performative if you show up in front of others. And who you are naturally just isn't right. But by the time I was 25, I was having these day-long episodes of brain fog and chronic fatigue. I could barely make it to work at 9:30, even with just a 15-minute commute. I felt groggy, out of it, unmotivated at work, and then I'd come home and have to take a 60 to 90-minute nap just to recover. In 2014, I moved back to my hometown. I took a hiatus from work, and I had to just figure out what the hell was wrong with me. So I spent thousands of dollars. I went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, and all I ever got was, everything looks fine, or these labs look okay, or you're perfectly healthy, or it's all in your head. So after doing this for about a year, I felt hopeless, devastated, and just didn't see light at the end of the tunnel for me. I had tried everything from different supplement protocols to a heavy metal detox, which I'll talk about later, to hyperbaric oxygen chambers, to a brain scan, to MRIs, to naturopathy, acupuncture, all sorts of really strange modalities that most people have never heard of, and none of them seem to really land. And worst of all, some of the people that quote unquote tried to help me actually ended up hurting me, and then I still had to pay them for it. At this point, I started exploring biohacking and alternative medicine. I read countless articles, watched a lot of videos, read medical journals in order to better understand what are the myriad of conditions that could be contributing to my chronic fatigue and brain fog that the doctors were missing. So at some point, I was taking up to like 20 supplements at the same time. And I tried a lot of different configurations of supplements. And I found some relief, for a little while. But it never, was quite that magic bullet. So like most of you, I started my journey on the physiological path, searching for a label, diagnosis, a disease, just to explain what exactly I was feeling. I even felt jealous towards people that had found names or labels to describe their condition. So my first root cause was having the MTHFR gene mutation, specifically the C677 homozygous. So methylation is a process that is almost like a biological switchboard that controls a lot of biological processes like fat metabolism, cardiovascular health, energy production, neurotransmitter imbalances, and a lot more. And so a disruption in your methylation could definitely cause low energy, partially because you're unable to convert vitamin B12 and folic acid or folate into a form your body can use. So this certainly contributed to my inability to have high energy levels. On top of that, for a few years, I was a vegetarian, so having this MTHFR mutation, not supplementing properly, and being a vegetarian, it was just a recipe for disaster. Fortunately, the MTHFR gene mutation is a pretty easy thing to fix or mitigate with just a few supplements. If you want to see my supplement routine that I take on a nearly daily basis, check out the video in the description below, or you can click on the link up here. The next root cause was elevated heavy metals. Specifically, mercury and cadmium were the culprits for me. This one's a little bit interrelated because having a disruption in the methylation cycle prevents you from detoxing properly. As a result, I had these elevated heavy metals because I wasn't addressing my MTHFR mutation. Additionally, I wasn't being mindful of what was in my personal care products. I was eating kind of high mercury fish, such as tuna, on a somewhat regular basis. And I wasn't really aware of what was in my personal care products or in my external environment. The fix for my elevated heavy metals was a round of chelation therapy with a functional medicine doctor. This was done about in 2015. I personally don't recommend doing this unless you absolutely have to. There are much gentler ways of removing heavy metals from your body, and I'll do an entire video on how to remove heavy metals safely. In my case, it did get the job done because my heavy metals were so high, but I also suffered some side effects because even once those metals were pulled out of the organs and into the bloodstream, I wasn't able to get them out. So I actually did experience brain fog and instances of chronic fatigue due to the chelation therapy. Another thing that I did just on a more regular basis was I started taking N-acetylcysteine. There's a link in the description below to the NAC that I take. It's also in my MTHFR supplement routine video, and glutathione in particular. So I take these a couple times a week. I also removed seafood from my diet. Not everybody needs to do this, but with the experience I had, it just seemed like the right thing to do. And last but certainly not least was be really mindful of your personal care products. Like stop using aerosol deodorants. Those are full with aluminum. There's a link below to the deodorant that I personally use that's aluminum and metal free. And there's a lot of other products too that do have heavy metals. So I would refer to the EWG, that's Environmental Working Group website, which I'll also link to in the description, to make sure that the products that you're using don't have those heavy metals, because those can contribute to elevated heavy metals. So be extra careful with this, especially if you have an MTHFR mutation. Next up is unprocessed emotions. So I know this one's going to sound woo-woo and very unscientific, but in my case, repressed emotions, and specifically not allowing myself to fully express and process the anger that I had towards those who hurt me, or allowing myself to feel the hurt that I was experiencing, particularly in my adolescence, did lead to a lot of my physical ailments in retrospect. Okay, so how is this possible? No doctors really talk about this, etc. In terms of the emotions, well, they do carry a vibrational charge. Every emotion has a vibrational frequency, let's say. And those frequencies do influence our various systems in the body. So our endocrine system, our kind of adrenals, thyroid, etc. Having unprocessed emotions could lead to all sorts of physical issues, such as digestion problems. You could have autoimmune issues, thyroid, skin, and the list goes on and on. So while I definitely had my difficulties in childhood, I don't feel like I had it exponentially worse than most people. However, I didn't have the tools to really process or make sense of what I was feeling, and sometimes the emotional safety to really express what was going on with me. I think this is common with a lot of men, and the result was that I turned that anger that I couldn't really embody or lean into towards myself. The result was that I was engaging in a lot of numbing behaviors. So that in the form of smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, sometimes doing drugs. There's numbing behaviors around shopping and even pornography. And so as a result, I was really kind of, transmuting these emotions into a lot of destructive behaviors aimed at myself as a result of my own self-loathing for not being able to express myself properly or really process what I was going through. As you can imagine, the fix for this is not very straightforward. While therapy might have worked for some people, I can't really speak to it that much. I don't have a lot of experience with cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy. However, for me, what was critical was two things. One is developing a daily meditation practice. And the reason that helped me is because I was able to observe my thoughts and really practice being with what my experience was in that moment without judging it, and kind of realizing that my mind doesn't have to take the form of just a passing thought. The second thing that was pretty game-changing for me was kind of body-based practices, understanding that our emotions really live in our body, not just intellectually, but doing things like 5 rhythms, ecstatic dance, the class, which is like a workout that is about self-study and emotional embodiment. So it's not that anger or sadness are good or bad. The idea is that you don't judge your emotions and you allow yourself to experience them fully. Unprocessed emotions quite literally eat you alive. So it's not about feeling happy all the time, but it's really about listening to the messages of your emotions, because emotions are our most fundamental language. If you want to learn more about this, just check out my video on the messages behind your emotions in the description below, or probably somewhere up here. The next root cause is worthy of several additional videos, which I'll definitely do in the future. Limiting beliefs. So limiting beliefs are subconscious belief patterns that you hold about yourself, others, and reality as a whole. Usually you've internalized them as a child or in early adulthood, and they served as survival mechanisms that you then carry into adulthood when they're actually no longer necessary. So limiting beliefs are one of the primary ways that we get in our own way, and that also includes with our health, surprisingly. Some of my limiting beliefs that really weighed me down and caused me a lot of emotional distress, which then led to physical symptoms, include just not feeling like I was ever enough, feeling like others are constantly judging me, not feeling emotionally safe in relationships, not being worthy of connection, and having money being something that is difficult to acquire. These, once again, there's so much to be said about limiting beliefs, but if you're having, brain fog and chronic fatigue, it's worth just examining, what limiting beliefs you may have that are really kind of in the driver's seat of your actions on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. How do you fix limiting beliefs? Man, this is, once again, something I'm going to talk a lot about in the future, because this is probably one of the most critical parts of personal development, is identifying, becoming aware, and then moving past your limiting beliefs and replacing them with new ones. So some of the things that I have tried include hypnosis, NLP, shadow work, inner child work, the Sedona method, doing forgiveness work to forgive those that have hurt us in our past, and also some of the body-based methods in the past really kind of help us break through the limiting beliefs as well. So my last root cause is a little bit of a speculation, but it is not having a life purpose. So this one may seem a little unrelated or strange. However, I have noticed that, at least when I was living without any purpose, I felt empty on the inside. I didn't have much motivation. I felt really dependent on the gratification of others rather than being grounded in my own purpose and moving through life on my own terms. And also I noticed the quality of my motivations was quite low. I was driven by negative motivation, which is a topic I'll cover in the future. But basically it was really all about moving towards comfort, away from suffering, And that led me to kind of play small with my life. When you orient your life towards a life purpose, or when you have a life purpose, it's almost like your life becomes one big hero's journey, and you see yourself kind of on this mission. Any obstacles that come your way are like different threshold guardians just testing your commitment to your path. And you're really kind of walking the high road, and everything just takes on a new meaning. All the suffering in your past makes sense, and it all starts to kind of come together for you. So what I did in order to discover my life purpose is I read a lot of books about people who have, studied this question. It was pretty hard. I made it my #1 goal in 2020. And that was, kind of around when I was doing New Year's planning, that to understand my life purpose, understand my life's work, and to make meaningful progress on that. And I did just that. And that's where Moksha Life came from. So if you want to hear more about that, you can go to the Welcome to Moksha video and check that out. So in the future, I'm going to be making it a lot simpler for people to understand their life purpose. I'm going to lay out some of the visualizations, journaling exercise, dig deep into the subconscious mind. And then I'm also going to help you, do the real work, executing the life purpose, getting out of your own way, and doing all the steps in between. So more on that to come. I'll definitely be sharing that in future videos once it's released. But that's it on life purpose. Okay, now that I went over the root causes of my brain fog along with some fixes, I want to recommend a few next steps if you're suffering from brain fog and chronic fatigue and you've been going to doctors and haven't gotten any answers. Okay, #1 is going to be understand your bio-individuality. You may not have heard this term, but basically you want to understand what food should you be eating, what supplements do you need to be taking, what do you need to avoid, are there any sort of vulnerabilities that you might have, so what kinds of things to avoid in your personal care products. My recommendation is that you do some degree of genetic testing. You also run a organic acids test, do a microbiome test. You want to do a food sensitivity test, which is different than an allergy test. This is going to highlight inflammation that is coming from foods that may actually be occurring 2 to 3 days after you eat the food. So it's going to be very difficult for a allergy test to even detect that. You want to also run your thyroid panel, all of your vitamins. I recommend something called a SpectraCell test, which measures the amount of nutrients that are actually going into your cells. And so that should be a pretty good starting point for you to really understand, okay, like where are my imbalances? Because ultimately the bio-individuality and all these tests are going to help you uncover imbalances rather than this disease. And one last thing, don't forget to test for heavy metals, especially if you're having a lot of brain fog. The next tip is to really do an inventory of all your personal care products, what you're putting into your body, and ensure that you're minimizing the toxic load that is going into your metaphorical rain barrel, right? How many toxins are we putting in? How much work does our liver have to do? I would recommend checking out the Environmental Working Group website. They have independent ratings on a wide variety of personal care products, skincare products, shampoos, laundry detergents, dishwasher soaps, you name it. They have some sort of review on it. You want to make sure that you're avoiding a lot of toxic chemicals and things that have a very low EWG rating. Additionally, the food you buy, there's something called the Dirty Dozen, which are foods that you should buy organic because their conventional form usually has some kind of toxic pesticides that you want to avoid. And then I believe they have something called the Clean 15, which are fruits or vegetables that can be bought conventional, although you can buy them organic as well. Next, you want to cultivate emotional awareness and resilience. You may want to start a meditation, a breathwork practice, eventually even if you're feeling stuck in life in particular, working with a coach. I'm going to have a lot of different videos on how to work with your emotions, but basically you want to start becoming cognizant of emotions, how they reside in the body, what they actually feel like on a regular basis, and then also find ways to process and release them, kind of be with them and your experience. All right, well, that's it for this episode. If you want more tips on how to master your mind, body, and emotions in order to live a life of purpose, please hit the subscribe button. There'll be a lot more episodes on personal development, holistic health, and much more. The idea here is that we want to bridge physical, mental, and emotional health so that you can kick ass at life.